What if I told you that your mailman could be a killer? What if the person who delivered your letters for 35 years was hiding the darkest secret imaginable? In Cedar Rapids, Iowa, this nightmare became reality when a single fingerprint destroyed a lie that had lasted for decades. Imagine trusting someone completely, only to discover they had blood on their hands. Imagine a community that thought they knew everyone, until they realized they knew no one at all. This is the story of Michael Harris, a factory worker who died alone on a cold December night, and Thomas Fitzgerald, the neighbor who carried that secret to his retirement. If you're ready to dive deep into one of America's most shocking cold cases, hit that subscribe button now because you won't believe how this story ends. And make sure to ring the notification bell. You don't want to miss a single twist in this incredible journey to justice. Detective Sarah Rodriguez had seen enough cold cases to know that miracles were rare in police work. But on March 10, 2023, as she stared at her computer screen in the Cedar Rapids Police Department, she was witnessing something that defied every assumption about how justice works. The automated fingerprint identification system had just delivered what should have been impossible. A match to evidence from a case that was older than her entire career. The partial print lifted from a coffee cup fragment found beside Michael Harris's body in 1988 belonged to Thomas Fitzgerald, a man who had lived exactly 2 blocks from the crime scene for his entire 73 years of life. Rodriguez's coffee had gone cold hours ago as she cross-referenced databases, checked and rechecked the match probability, and scrolled through decades of investigation files that filled 3 storage boxes in the evidence room. The fingerprint match showed a confidence level of 99.7%. In forensic terms, that was as close to certainty as science allowed. But certainty felt like quicksand when the suspect had been living in plain sight for 35 years, attending the same Lutheran church where Michael Harris's mother had prayed every Sunday for answers about her son's death. Fitzgerald's name appeared in the original case file exactly twice. Once as a neighbor who had reported seeing Michael Harris leave for work on the night of December 15, 1988, and again as a character witness who had described Harris as a good man who kept to himself. Both statements had been brief, unremarkable, the kind of routine neighbor testimony that filled the margins of every small town investigation. Nothing about Thomas Fitzgerald had raised suspicion. He was a postal worker with a clean record, a man who waved from his front porch and shoveled elderly neighbors' sidewalks without being asked. Rodriguez pulled Fitzgerald's driver's license photo from the state database. The face that appeared on her screen belonged to someone she had seen at community events, someone whose retirement party had been announced in the Cedar Rapids Gazette just 2 years earlier. His employment record showed 38 years with the United States Postal Service, a pension that kicked in precisely on schedule, and 0 criminal history beyond a speeding ticket in 1994. The detective's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her phone to call Captain Morrison. In small cities like Cedar Rapids, where everyone knew everyone else's business, this kind of revelation didn't just solve a case, it shattered the fundamental assumptions that held communities together. Neighbors trusted neighbors. Friends were friends. The man who brought your mail every day for nearly 4 decades didn't murder people and then live quietly with that secret for the rest of his working life. Outside her office window, Rodriguez could see the Midwest Industrial Components building, now abandoned and tagged with graffiti, its broken windows reflecting the pale morning light. In a few hours, she would have to make a phone call that would change everything Thomas Fitzgerald thought he knew about the rest of his life. But first, she needed to understand how a partial fingerprint had managed to hide a killer in plain sight for 35 years, and why the truth had chosen this particular Tuesday morning to finally surface from the evidence room's forgotten corners. The original investigators had cataloged the coffee cup fragment as item E47. A piece of ceramic no larger than a silver dollar, stained brown and discovered beneath a workbench where Harris's body had been found. Fingerprint technology in 1988 required clear, complete impressions. The smudged partial print on the fragment had been photographed, filed, and essentially forgotten. 3 decades of technological advancement had changed everything. Enhanced imaging software could now extract ridge patterns from surfaces that earlier generations of forensic technicians would have dismissed as worthless. The same evidence that had sat in storage for 35 years was about to expose a truth that would rock Cedar Rapids to its foundation. Rodriguez knew that within 24 hours, Thomas Fitzgerald would be sitting in an interrogation room, and a community would be forced to confront the possibility that evil had been hiding behind the most ordinary facade imaginable. The mailman who had delivered birthday cards and Christmas packages, who had known every family's routine and every child's name, was about to become the most hated man in Cedar Rapids. But that was tomorrow's nightmare. Today, Rodriguez had to build a case that could survive scrutiny, gather evidence that could support charges, and prepare for the media storm that would follow when the news broke. She had solved cold cases before, but never one where the killer had been hiding in plain sight for over 3 decades. The truth about Michael Harris's death was about to surface, and it would change Cedar Rapids forever. This is just the beginning of a story that will leave you questioning everyone you think you know. Keep watching to discover how a routine night shift turned into 35 years of lies, and don't forget to like this video if you're already hooked on this incredible case. December 15, 1988, began like every other Wednesday in Michael Harris's carefully structured life. He kissed his wife Janet goodbye at 10:30 p.m., grabbed his thermos of black coffee and the roast beef sandwich she had wrapped in wax paper, and walked the 4 blocks through Cedar Rapids Industrial District to begin another 8-hour shift at Midwest Industrial Components. The snow that had been threatening all day finally began to fall as he punched his time card at exactly 11 p.m. Joining the skeleton crew of 12 workers who kept the factory's production lines running through the night. The Midwest Industrial Components building squatted like a brick fortress along the Cedar River, its windows glowing amber against the darkness as massive machines stamped out automotive parts for Ford and General Motors assembly plants across the Midwest. During day shifts, the factory floor buzzed with the controlled chaos of 200 workers. But night shift belonged to a different breed, men like Michael who preferred the solitude of working while the rest of Cedar Rapids slept. The pay differential was modest, but the peace was priceless for someone who had grown wary of small-town conversations and second-guessing. Michael's workstation sat in the southwest corner of the factory floor, where he operated a hydraulic press that shaped transmission housings from sheets of cold, rolled steel. It was methodical work that required attention but left room for thought. And Michael had been thinking quite a lot lately about problems that seemed to have no clean solutions. His gambling habits had evolved from occasional entertainment to something approaching compulsion. The debts he had accumulated during late-night poker games in the back room of Sullivan's Tavern were beginning to demand attention he couldn't afford to give. Janet didn't know about the money he owed, and Michael intended to keep it that way. Security guard Frank Morrison would later tell investigators that he had spoken with Michael around 200 am during his routine rounds. Michael had seemed distracted, Morrison recalled, but not unusually so. He was drinking coffee from his usual ceramic mug, the one Janet had given him for his 34th birthday 2 months earlier, decorated with a cartoon of Garfield complaining about Mondays. Morrison had made a joke about the irony of drinking from a Monday-hating mug on a Wednesday morning, and Michael had managed a weak smile before returning to his work. It would be the last conversation anyone would have with Michael Harris while he was alive. The hydraulic press required Michael to feed steel sheets into its mechanical mouth every 45 seconds, but the machine's computerized system would log any interruption in the production cycle. When the morning shift supervisor discovered Michael's body at 700 am, the press showed that it had stopped operating at 317 am. Whatever had happened to Michael Harris had occurred during a narrow window, when the factory's security cameras were cycling through their automated sweep pattern, leaving his corner of the building unmonitored for exactly 12 minutes. 12 minutes that would haunt Cedar Rapids for the next 35 years. Michael lay face down between his workstation and a tool storage cabinet, blood pooled beneath his head where it had struck the concrete floor. The back of his skull showed evidence of blunt force trauma that forensic pathologist Cedar Elizabeth Chen would later determine had been caused by a single powerful blow from a heavy object. No weapon was found at the scene. Michael's wallet remained in his back pocket, containing $127 in cash and all of his credit cards. His wedding ring, a simple gold band that had belonged to his father, was still on his finger. Nothing appeared to have been stolen. The coffee mug lay shattered near his body, its fragments scattered across the oil-stained concrete. Crime scene photographer William Torres documented each piece, not knowing that the largest fragment would spend the next 35 years waiting in an evidence box for technology advanced enough to reveal the truth it carried. The factory's employee entrance showed no signs of forced entry. Security logs indicated that no one had used their access card to enter the building after Michael's 11:00 p.m. arrival. Whoever had killed him was either already inside the building or knew another way in. Janet Harris received the phone call at 8:15 a.m. just as she was preparing to leave for her job at the Cedar Rapids Public Library. The voice belonged to Detective Raymond Sullivan, who spoke the words that would define the rest of her life with a gentleness that somehow made them even more devastating. "Ms. Harris, I'm afraid I have some very bad news about your husband." Janet would later say that she knew Michael was dead before Detective Sullivan finished his sentence. There was something in his tone, something in the way he paused between words, that told her the worst had happened. She dropped the phone and collapsed in her kitchen, still wearing the blue dress she had planned to wear to work. By noon, word had spread throughout Cedar Rapids that Michael Harris had been murdered at the factory. The news hit the tight-knit community like a physical blow. Murders didn't happen in Cedar Rapids, especially not to quiet, hard-working men like Michael who kept to themselves and caused no trouble. The investigation that followed would consume the Cedar Rapids Police Department for months, generate hundreds of pages of reports, and ultimately go nowhere. No one could have imagined that the killer was walking among them every day, delivering their mail with a smile and a wave, carrying a secret that would eat at him for 35 years. Thomas Fitzgerald attended Michael's funeral 3 days later. Standing in the back of the Lutheran church with other neighbors who had come to pay their respects, he expressed his condolences to Janet Harris, telling her what a good man her husband had been. He even signed the guest book that the funeral home provided for visitors. For 35 years, that signature would be the closest anyone came to identifying Michael Harris's killer. The investigation that followed would become one of Iowa's most frustrating cold cases. Stay with us to discover how detectives in 1988 came so close to the truth, yet missed the killer who was hiding in plain sight. Make sure you're subscribed because this story gets even more incredible. Detective Raymond Sullivan had worked homicide cases for 14 years when Michael Harris's murder landed on his desk, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for the peculiar challenges of investigating a death that seemed to defy logical explanation. The Cedar Rapids Police Department operated with a detective division of exactly 4 investigators, and 2 of them were already stretched thin working a string of convenience store robberies that had been plaguing the east side of town. Sullivan found himself partnered with Detective Carol Martinez, a sharp-minded investigator whose instincts were better than her resources, trying to solve a murder that left no clear path forward. The crime scene at Midwest Industrial Components had been compromised from the moment morning shift supervisor Jim Patterson discovered Michael's body, and immediately called for the factory's first aid team before contacting police. 3 workers had trampled through the area around Michael's workstation, their boots tracking oil and metal shavings across potential evidence before Sullivan and Martinez arrived at 800 am. The factory's management insisted that production could not be halted for more than a few hours, creating pressure that forced the investigation team to work around operational schedules that seemed designed to destroy any remaining forensic evidence. The absence of forced entry became the investigation's central puzzle. Midwest Industrial Components maintained what appeared to be reasonable security for a facility of its size, keyed entry doors that required employee access cards after business hours, security cameras that covered most exterior approaches, and Frank Morrison's hourly rounds throughout the building. Yet someone had entered the factory. killed Michael Harris with enough force to fracture his skull, and vanished without triggering a single security protocol. The building's employee entrance required both an access card and a 4-digit personal identification number that changed monthly. Michael's card remained clipped to his work shirt, and computer logs showed no record of any other employee entering the building after his 11:00 p.m. arrival. Sullivan spent 3 days reviewing security camera footage that raised more questions than it answered. The cameras operated on a 15-minute rotation cycle, providing coverage of different areas in sequential sweeps rather than continuous monitoring. During the 12-minute gap when Michael's corner of the factory floor went unmonitored, the exterior cameras showed no movement near any entrance. The only vehicle in the employee parking lot belonged to Michael himself, a 1985 Chevrolet Citation that sat undisturbed beneath a growing layer of snow until Janet Harris arrived to drive it home 2 days later. If the killer had arrived by car, he had parked somewhere else and approached the building on foot through the industrial district's maze of abandoned lots and railway sidings. The forensic evidence collection proceeded with the methodical frustration that defined small-town police work in 1988. Cedar Rapids lacked its own crime laboratory, requiring all physical evidence to be transported to the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation facility in Des Moines, where processing times stretched into weeks rather than days. The coffee mug fragments were photographed and cataloged, but fingerprint analysis revealed only smudged partials that provided no immediate leads. Blood spatter analysis suggested that Michael had been struck while standing near his workstation, but the absence of defensive wounds indicated that he had been caught completely off guard by his attacker. Martinez discovered that the factory's employee records had been stored in a filing system that seemed designed to prevent easy access to information. Personnel files were scattered across different departments, with some records dating back 15 years kept in basement storage rooms that smelled of mildew and industrial solvent. Background checks on the night shift crew revealed nothing more interesting than the occasional driving violation or divorce proceeding. Michael Harris appeared to have been well liked by his coworkers, respected for his reliability and his tendency to keep personal business private. No one could identify any workplace conflicts that might have escalated to violence. The first major break in the case came when Sullivan decided to canvass the bars and taverns that stayed open late enough to accommodate night shift workers looking to unwind after their shifts ended. Sullivan's Tavern, a dimly lit establishment 6 blocks from the factory, catered to the kind of customers who preferred their conversations conducted in low voices and their business kept private. Bartender Rick Coleman initially claimed no specific memory of Michael Harris, but Sullivan's persistent questioning and a suggestion that obstruction of justice charges might be forthcoming eventually loosened Coleman's tongue enough to acknowledge that Michael had been a regular customer who participated in poker games that convened in the tavern's back room several nights each week. The poker games operated with the kind of casual illegality that small-town law enforcement typically ignored, but the stakes involved amounts that exceeded casual entertainment. Coleman described sessions that sometimes continued until dawn, with pots that reached several $100s and players who included factory workers, construction contractors, and at least one city council member who insisted on anonymity. Michael had been lucky during the early months of his participation, Coleman recalled, winning enough to cover his losses and take home modest profits that might have explained some mysterious bank deposits Janet didn't know about. But his luck had turned dramatically during the autumn of 1988, and by December he owed significant amounts to players who had grown impatient with promises of future payment. The revelation about Michael's gambling debts opened new avenues of investigation that would consume months of detective work. Sullivan and Martinez began interviewing poker players, loan sharks, and anyone else who might have had financial dealings with Michael Harris. What they discovered was a man who had been living a double life, hiding debts and problems from his wife while trying to gamble his way out of trouble. But every lead seemed to end in alibis that couldn't be broken or motives that didn't quite add up to murder. The investigation that had begun with such promise gradually settled into the frustrating routine of following leads that led nowhere and waiting for breaks that never came. Thomas Fitzgerald's name appeared in the case file during the second week of the investigation. When detectives were interviewing neighbors about anything unusual they might have observed on the night of December 15th, his statement was brief and unremarkable. He had seen Michael leave for work around 10:30 p.m., waving goodbye as he walked down Maple Street toward the factory. Fitzgerald seemed genuinely concerned about the violent crime that had occurred in his neighborhood, and willing to assist the investigation in any way possible. Detective Sullivan's interview notes characterized him as cooperative and forthcoming, someone who appeared to be exactly what he seemed, a quiet postal worker who kept his property well, maintained and minded his own business. No one thought to ask Fitzgerald for his fingerprints. Why would they? He wasn't a suspect, he was just a helpful neighbor trying to assist with the investigation. For 35 years, that simple oversight would keep Michael Harris's killer free. The investigation was about to take several dramatic turns that would lead detectives down rabbit holes for months. But the real killer was hiding in plain sight, continuing his daily mail route as if nothing had happened. Keep watching to see how close investigators came to the truth, and how they missed it completely. The first major suspect in Michael Harris's murder emerged from the shadows of his secret life when Detective Martinez discovered the truth about his affair with Sandra Walsh, a married woman who worked the day shift at Midwest Industrial Components. Sandra was 31 years old. Attractive in a way that suggested someone who had learned to use her appearance strategically, and completely unprepared for questions about her relationship with Michael when Martinez confronted her at her riveting station on the factory floor. Sandra's composure cracked immediately when Martinez mentioned that witnesses had seen them together at Sullivan's Tavern during late-night poker games. She admitted to an affair that had been continuing for 4 months. Meetings that occurred when her husband Danny worked construction jobs out of town and Sandra could slip away from her shift responsibilities without attracting attention. The affair had been discovered by Danny Walsh on December 10th. Sandra finally confessed when he returned home unexpectedly from a job site and found Sandra's car missing at 200 am. Danny had driven to the factory looking for his wife, spotted her car in the parking lot, and waited until Sandra emerged with Michael at the end of their shift. The confrontation that followed had been violent enough to leave Michael with bruises on his ribs and a black eye that he had concealed from his own wife with carefully applied makeup and explanations about workplace accidents. Danny Walsh's explosive temper was legendary throughout Cedar Rapids, documented in police reports that stretched back to his teenage years, and included 2 domestic violence arrests that had been dismissed when Sandra refused to testify against her husband. Detective Sullivan found Danny at his regular barstool in Murphy's Pub on January 8, 1989, drinking whiskey and maintaining his innocence with the kind of aggressive defensiveness that made experienced investigators pay closer attention rather than backing away. Danny's alibi for the night of December 15th appeared solid at first examination. He claimed to have been working a late shift at a construction site in Waterloo, 30 miles northeast of Cedar Rapids, pouring concrete for a shopping center foundation that required round-the-clock work to meet winter weather deadlines. His supervisor, Earl Mackenzie, confirmed that Danny had been present for the entire shift, which ran from 6:00 p.m. on December 15th until 8:00 am the following morning. But Martinez discovered inconsistencies when she interviewed other workers from the crew. 2 men recalled Danny taking an extended break around 200 am, claiming he needed to drive home to Cedar Rapids to retrieve a specialized tool that had been left in his truck. The round trip would have required approximately 2 hours, placing Danny in Cedar Rapids during the window when Michael Harris was murdered. Martinez spent weeks trying to verify Danny's movements during those crucial hours, but winter road conditions and the chaotic nature of construction work made it impossible to establish a definitive timeline. Danny's truck was examined for evidence of recent travel, but winter road salt and construction site debris made it impossible to determine when or where the vehicle had been driven. His work clothes were tested for blood evidence using techniques available in 1989, but the results were inconclusive. Most frustratingly, Danny's confrontational personality made him appear guilty of something during every interview, even when discussing topics completely unrelated to Michael's murder. The second major suspect emerged in March 1989 when Detective Sullivan learned about Michael's gambling debts through bartender Rick Coleman's reluctant testimony. Vincent Kowalski operated an informal lending operation that catered to factory workers and small business owners who needed cash quickly and were willing to pay substantial interest rates for the privilege of avoiding traditional banking procedures. Kowalski's clients understood that defaulting on their obligations would result in consequences more immediate and personal than damaged credit scores. Michael Harris owed him $2,000 when he died, and Kowalski made no effort to hide the fact that their last conversation, which occurred 3 days before the murder, had included explicit threats about what would happen if the debt remained unpaid. Kowalski was a thick-bodied man in his late 40s who had moved to Cedar Rapids from Chicago under circumstances that he preferred not to discuss in detail. His background check revealed arrests for assault and illegal gambling in Illinois, but no convictions that would have prevented him from establishing his lending business in Iowa. When Martinez interviewed him at his auto repair shop on the south side of town, Kowalski displayed the kind of casual menace that successful loan sharks cultivated like a professional skill. He admitted that Michael had been behind on his payments and acknowledged that their conversation had included threats, but Kowalski's alibi proved even more ironclad than Danny Walsh's fabricated construction shift. On the night of December 15th, he had been playing poker in a game hosted by Cedar Rapids City Councilman Robert Fletcher, a session that included 6 other participants who could verify his presence from 100 p.m. until approximately 1400 am. The game had been photographed by one of the participants who was celebrating a significant win, and the pictures showed Kowalski clearly visible at the table during the time frame when Michael was murdered. Sullivan spent weeks investigating whether Kowalski might have hired someone else to collect his debt, but the loan shark's operation appeared to be strictly personal, and no evidence suggested that he employed enforcers other than himself. The dead end was particularly frustrating because Kowalski's personality and criminal background made him such a perfect suspect for a murder that seemed motivated by money and violence. Janet Harris's world collapsed gradually as detectives revealed the secret life her husband had been living. The gambling debts, the affair with Sandra Walsh, and the lies that had funded his poker games, an extramarital relationship destroyed her memories of their marriage and left her questioning everything she thought she had known about the man she had loved. She stopped eating regularly, stopped sleeping through the night, and developed the habit of walking through Cedar Rapids at all hours, as if Michael's killer might materialize from the shadows if she searched long enough. Neighbors found her at the factory at 300 am, standing where Michael's body had been discovered, calling his name into the darkness. The investigation consumed 8 months of intensive work that ultimately produced nothing more substantial than a collection of suspects who couldn't be eliminated but couldn't be charged. Danny Walsh remained belligerent and suspicious, but his alibi was too complex to be fabricated. Vincent Kowalski had motive and means, but his whereabouts during the murder were documented by photographs. Sandra Walsh was clearly involved in the drama that led to Michael's death, but she lacked the physical strength to inflict the kind of trauma that had killed him. By December 1989, exactly 1 year after Michael's murder, the case had effectively gone cold. Detective Sullivan was reassigned to other investigations, and the evidence boxes were moved to storage, where they would remain largely undisturbed for the next 3 decades. Thomas Fitzgerald continued delivering mail to every house in Cedar Rapids, including the one where Janet Harris lived alone with her grief and unanswered questions. He brought her birthday cards from relatives who lived out of state, Christmas packages from family members who worried about her isolation, and letters from the police department updating her on the lack of progress in her husband's case. Fitzgerald was unfailingly polite during these interactions, expressing sympathy for her loss and asking if there was anything he could do to help. Janet would later remember his kindness during those dark months, how he had taken extra care with her mail, and sometimes lingered on her porch to ask how she was coping with her husband's death. She never suspected that the man who delivered her mail was the same person who had taken her husband's life. For 35 years, Thomas Fitzgerald would carry that secret, watching Janet age and withdraw from the world, knowing that he was responsible for her pain, but unable to confess the truth that might have given her peace. The investigation was falling apart, suspects were slipping away, and Janet Harris was left with nothing but questions that would haunt her for decades. But sometimes the truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. Stay tuned to discover how modern technology would finally expose the killer who had been hiding in plain sight all along. Thomas Fitzgerald's life after December 15, 1988, was a masterpiece of compartmentalization that would have impressed criminal psychologists if they had known to study it. On the surface, he maintained the same routines that had defined his existence before becoming a killer, rising at 5:30 a.m. for his postal service rounds, attending Sunday services at Grace Lutheran Church, and participating in community events, with the kind of reliable presence that made him invisible in the best possible way. But beneath that carefully maintained facade, Fitzgerald was slowly suffocating under the weight of a secret that grew heavier with each passing year. He had killed Michael Harris in a moment of panic, a single blow delivered with more force than he had intended, and now he was trapped in a lie that required constant vigilance to maintain. The first few months after the murder were the most dangerous. Fitzgerald found himself jumping at every phone ring, assuming that each knock on his door might be Detective Sullivan with questions that would expose his involvement. He rehearsed his story obsessively. He had seen Michael leave for work, nothing more, just a neighbor observing the routine activities of his community. When Sullivan interviewed him in January 1989, Fitzgerald's hands shook so badly that he had to keep them in his pockets throughout the conversation. But the detective interpreted his nervousness as the natural anxiety of someone who lived in a neighborhood where a violent crime had occurred. Fitzgerald's clean record and cooperative demeanor deflected any suspicion that might have developed. The psychological toll of maintaining his secret began to manifest in ways that Fitzgerald couldn't control. He developed insomnia that persisted for years, lying awake during the early morning hours when Michael had died, replaying the confrontation that had escalated so quickly from a financial discussion to a moment of violence that changed everything. He started avoiding the industrial district where the factory was located, taking circuitous routes during his mail delivery rounds that added miles to his daily schedule rather than risk passing the building where he had committed murder. When the factory was finally demolished in 2003, Fitzgerald felt a mixture of relief and loss. The physical reminder of his crime was gone, but so was the last connection to the man whose life he had taken. The most difficult aspect of carrying his secret was the way it affected his relationships with the community he served. Fitzgerald had always been well liked by the residents on his mail route, someone who remembered birthdays and asked about sick relatives, and took extra care with packages that might contain fragile items. After the murder, these interactions became psychological minefields. Every conversation about crime in Cedar Rapids, every discussion of the unsolved Harris case, every expression of sympathy for Janet Harris's loss required Fitzgerald to respond with appropriate concern while concealing his intimate knowledge of the truth. He became particularly skilled at deflecting conversations that veered too close to the murder investigation. When neighbors speculated about who might have killed Michael Harris, Fitzgerald would nod sympathetically and suggest that the police were probably following leads that couldn't be discussed publicly. When someone mentioned seeing Janet Harris walking through town at odd hours, Fitzgerald would express appropriate concern for her mental health and suggest that the community should be more supportive. The hardest moments came when Fitzgerald had to deliver mail to Janet Harris herself. She had aged dramatically in the months following her husband's death, her auburn hair turning gray, and her previously bright demeanor replaced by the hollow expression of someone who had lost more than a spouse. She had lost her faith in the basic safety and predictability of the world. Janet often lingered on her front porch when Fitzgerald delivered her mail, clearly hungry for human contact but unable to engage in the kind of casual conversation that had once come naturally to her. She would ask him about his family, his work, anything that might provide a few minutes of distraction from her grief and loneliness. Fitzgerald found these encounters almost unbearable. He wanted to comfort her, to somehow ease the pain that his actions had caused, but every word of sympathy felt like a betrayal of the truth she deserved to know. He began timing his deliveries to her house for moments when she was less likely to be home, leaving her mail in the box and hurrying away before she could emerge to talk. As years passed and the investigation remained cold, Fitzgerald gradually allowed himself to believe that he might never be caught. The forensic technology of 1988 had been insufficient to process the evidence he had left behind, and the passage of time was making it increasingly unlikely that new leads would develop. He began to relax slightly, participating more fully in community activities and even joining the volunteer fire department in 1995. His colleagues praised his dedication and reliability, qualities that had characterized his entire adult life and made it impossible for anyone to imagine him as a killer. Fitzgerald's mother died in 1997, the cancer finally claiming her after years of treatment that had motivated the financial desperation that led to Michael Harris's death. He stood at her graveside, surrounded by neighbors and postal service colleagues who had come to pay their respects, and wondered if she would have forgiven him for what he had done to keep her alive a few months longer. The debt that had triggered the confrontation with Michael Harris had died with his mother, but Fitzgerald continued making payments to a memorial fund at Grace Lutheran Church in her name. It was a form of penance that eased his conscience slightly, though he understood that no amount of charitable giving could balance the scales of what he had taken from Janet Harris and the Harris family. By the time Fitzgerald retired from the Postal Service in 2018, Cedar Rapids had largely forgotten about Michael Harris's murder. New residents had moved into the neighborhood, drawn by affordable housing and the town's reputation for safety and community spirit. They knew nothing about the unsolved crime that had once dominated local conversations. Fitzgerald's retirement party was held at the community center, the same building where search parties had once assembled when children went missing, and where town meetings addressed concerns about crime and safety. His colleagues presented him with a plaque recognizing his 38 years of faithful service, and the Postmaster General sent a letter commending his exemplary record. As Fitzgerald accepted the applause and wishes of people who had known him for decades, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had successfully maintained his secret for 30 years. He had served his community with distinction, raised money for charity, and lived the kind of quiet, unremarkable life that attracted no attention from law enforcement. He thought he was safe. He thought his secret would die with him, taking its place alongside all the other small-town mysteries that fade into local folklore and eventually disappear entirely. He had no way of knowing that technology was evolving in ways that would make his 30-year-old crime as visible as if it had happened yesterday. The coffee cup fragment that carried his fingerprint was waiting in an evidence box, patient as a time bomb, ready to explode his carefully constructed lie when the right investigator finally applied the right technology to its hidden secrets. Fitzgerald thought he had gotten away with the perfect crime. But cold cases have a way of coming back to life when you least expect it. Keep watching to discover how Detective Sarah Rodriguez would use cutting-edge technology to crack a case that had been cold for over 3 decades. Detective Sarah Rodriguez inherited the Michael Harris case file in October 2019 during a departmental reorganization that reassigned all cold cases to investigators with specialized training in forensic technology advancement. The 3 bankers' boxes containing 31 years of accumulated evidence and documentation had been gathering dust in the Cedar Rapids Police Department's storage facility, occasionally reviewed by ambitious detectives who hoped that fresh eyes might reveal overlooked connections. Rodriguez approached cold cases with the methodical intensity of someone who understood that time could be either an enemy or an ally, depending on how it was utilized. Modern forensic techniques had revolutionized criminal investigation since 1988, transforming evidence that previous generations of detectives had dismissed as useless into potential gold mines of information. The combined DNA index system had expanded exponentially, now containing genetic profiles from millions of individuals across the United States. Fingerprint analysis had evolved from manual comparison techniques to computerized systems that could detect patterns invisible to human examination. Most importantly, evidence preservation methods had improved dramatically, meaning that items stored in climate-controlled facilities maintained their forensic value far longer than investigators in 1988 had believed possible. Rodriguez was drawn to the Harris case partly because of its completeness. The original investigators had been thorough in their documentation, creating a detailed record that provided context for every piece of evidence and witness statement. But she was also intrigued by the psychological puzzle it represented. Michael Harris had been killed by someone who had gained access to a secure facility, committed murder without leaving obvious forensic evidence, and then vanished without a trace. The decision to resubmit evidence from the Harris case was motivated partly by departmental mandate and partly by Rodriguez's growing obsession with a murder that seemed to have been designed to frustrate investigation. She suspected that the truth about Michael Harris's death was hiding in plain sight, obscured by the investigative limitations of 1988 rather than destroyed by the passage of time. Rodriguez began her review by creating a comprehensive timeline that incorporated every piece of information from the original investigation. She mapped Michael's movements during his final day, cataloged the whereabouts of every suspect and witness, and analyzed the physical evidence with the benefit of 3 decades of hindsight. What emerged was a picture of an investigation that had been competent within the limitations of its era, but handicapped by technology that couldn't extract meaningful information from partial fingerprints, trace DNA samples, or security camera footage that seemed too grainy to provide useful details. The first breakthrough came when Rodriguez submitted the coffee cup fragments to the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation's upgraded forensic laboratory in November 2019. Advanced imaging techniques revealed fingerprint ridge patterns that had been invisible to investigators 3 decades earlier, but the partial prints still required database comparison to produce any meaningful results. Rodriguez requested that the enhanced fingerprint be run through the automated fingerprint identification system, a process that would compare the recovered evidence against millions of records maintained by law enforcement agencies across the United States. The comparison process could take weeks to complete, time that Rodriguez used to re-examine witness statements and evidence logs with fresh perspective. She discovered inconsistencies that the original investigators had noted but never fully explored, gaps in security camera coverage that seemed too convenient to be accidental, testimony from factory workers that contained subtle contradictions about the timeline of events on December 15, 1988, and references to individuals who had been present at the factory that night but whose statements had never been formally recorded. Most intriguingly, Rodriguez found evidence that the original investigation had focused heavily on suspects with obvious motives: Danny Walsh's jealous rage, Vincent Kowalski's financial interest, the mysterious drifter who had been seen near the factory, while giving minimal attention to witnesses whose testimony seemed routine and unremarkable. She began to wonder if the killer might have been hiding among the helpful neighbors and concerned citizens who had assisted with the investigation, someone whose cooperation had deflected suspicion rather than attracting it. It was a theory that would prove more accurate than she could have imagined. Janet Harris had died in 2014, succumbing to lung cancer after spending 26 years waiting for answers about her husband's murder. But her sister Margaret Thompson had maintained contact with the police department throughout the intervening decades, calling every year on the anniversary of Michael's death to ask whether any progress had been made. Rodriguez contacted Margaret in December 2019 to explain that new forensic techniques were being applied to evidence from the case. careful not to raise expectations while acknowledging that technological advancement had created possibilities that hadn't existed when the investigation began. Margaret Thompson was 68 years old in 2019, retired from her job as a high school mathematics teacher and living in the same Cedar Rapids neighborhood where she had grown up alongside Janet. The two sisters had been inseparable throughout their childhood, and Margaret had watched Janet's gradual emotional decline following Michael's murder with the helpless frustration of someone who understood that grief without resolution possessed a particularly corrosive power. Janet had never remarried, never moved away from the house she had shared with Michael, and never stopped believing that someone in Cedar Rapids knew more about her husband's death than they were willing to admit. She had organized annual memorial services on the anniversary of Michael's death, hoping that publicity might encourage witnesses to come forward with information that could break the case open. The memorial services had been well attended during the first few years, drawing friends, neighbors, and coworkers who wanted to show support for Janet and maintain pressure on law enforcement to solve the case. But as years passed without progress, attendance dwindled until only Margaret and a few close friends continued to gather at Michael's grave each December 15th. Rodriguez attended the 2019 memorial service, standing quietly at the back of the small group that had assembled at Riverside Cemetery to remember Michael Harris and support his surviving family members. She listened to Margaret read from a letter Janet had written before her death, expressing her continued faith that justice would eventually be served and her husband's killer would be held accountable. Watching Margaret's determined composure as she honored her sister's memory, Rodriguez felt the weight of responsibility that came with being the latest detective assigned to pursue justice for Michael Harris. She understood that solving cold cases required more than advanced technology. It demanded a personal commitment to the victims and families who deserved answers, even decades after their lives had been shattered. The fingerprint comparison process required 6 weeks to complete, a delay that Rodriguez used to investigate aspects of the case that had received insufficient attention during the original investigation. She interviewed retired factory workers who might have remembered details that seemed unimportant in 1988, but could provide crucial context 30 years later. She also began researching the backgrounds of witnesses and peripheral figures who had provided statements during the original investigation, looking for connections or patterns that might have been missed. It was tedious work that required patience and attention to detail, qualities that Rodriguez had developed during her years of cold case investigation. When the fingerprint match notification appeared on Rodriguez's computer screen on March 10, 2023, she initially assumed that the system had generated an error. The name associated with the recovered print belonged to someone who had been interviewed during the original investigation, someone whose statement had been brief and unremarkable, someone whose involvement in the case had seemed purely incidental. Thomas Fitzgerald's fingerprint on Michael Harris's coffee cup was about to transform a 35-year-old mystery into a case that would force Cedar Rapids to confront the possibility that the truth had been hiding in their midst all along. Rodriguez was about to make a discovery that would shock not just the police department, but the entire community of Cedar Rapids. The killer hadn't disappeared, he had been there all along, hiding behind a uniform and a smile. Don't miss what happens next in this incredible story of justice delayed but not denied. The forensic laboratory at the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation had undergone a technological transformation that would have seemed like science fiction to the investigators who first processed Michael Harris's evidence in 1988. Senior forensic technician Juter Amanda Chen worked in a sterile environment where computer monitors displayed fingerprint ridge patterns with microscopic precision, and database servers could process comparisons at speeds that reduced weeks of manual work to minutes of automated analysis. The coffee cup fragment that had sat in evidence storage for 35 years was about to receive the kind of scientific attention that could extract secrets from surfaces that earlier generations of investigators had considered forensically worthless. The fragment measured exactly 2.3 inches at its widest point, a curved piece of ceramic that had broken away from the handle area of Michael's Garfield mug when it shattered against the factory floor. The original 1988 analysis had identified the presence of a partial fingerprint on the fragment's exterior surface, but the smudged impression had been deemed too incomplete for meaningful comparison using the manual techniques available at the time. The print appeared to show portions of a thumb impression with visible ridge patterns that covered approximately 40% of what would constitute a complete fingerprint. Advanced digital imaging technology allowed Cedar Chen to photograph the fragment using multiple wavelengths of light that revealed ridge patterns invisible to conventional photography. The process involved exposing the ceramic surface to different frequencies of illumination while computer software analyzed the reflected light patterns to identify areas where human skin oils had created microscopic impressions on the mug's surface. Each wavelength revealed different aspects of the fingerprint, and specialized software combined these multiple images to create a composite impression that contained significantly more detail than any single photograph could capture. The enhanced fingerprint showed ridge characteristics that had been completely obscured in the 1988 analysis. Computer algorithms identified 12 specific points where ridge patterns formed loops, whorls, and arches that could serve as comparison markers, exceeding the minimum threshold required for database submission by a substantial margin. Chen's report noted that the print quality was sufficient to support legal proceedings if a match were identified. The automated fingerprint identification system operated with computational power that processed millions of comparisons simultaneously. Searching for patterns that matched the ridge characteristics extracted from Michael's coffee mug, the system compared the enhanced fingerprint against records maintained by law enforcement agencies across all 50 states, federal databases that included military personnel and government employees, and international criminal databases. The comparison process involved mathematical algorithms that calculated probability scores for potential matches, ranking results according to the likelihood that two fingerprints had originated from the same individual. Cedar Chen submitted the enhanced fingerprint on March 8, 2023, initiating a search process that would continue running until the system either identified a match that exceeded the threshold for reporting or exhausted all available databases without finding comparable patterns. The search parameters were set to report any match that achieved a confidence level of 90% or higher, meaning that the mathematical probability of error was less than 1 in 10. Most database searches concluded within 72 hours, either producing matches that warranted further investigation or returning negative results that confirmed the absence of any comparable fingerprints in the system. The notification that appeared on Chen's computer terminal on March 10 indicated that the system had identified a potential match with a confidence level of 99.7%, a score that approached the mathematical certainty that forensic scientists considered conclusive evidence of identity. The match had been located in Iowa's state criminal justice database, indicating that the individual had been fingerprinted during some form of contact with law enforcement agencies within the state. Chen's initial assumption was that the system had identified someone with a criminal record who had been arrested or convicted of offenses that required fingerprint collection. But the database entry that appeared on her screen contained information that challenged that expectation completely. Thomas Fitzgerald's fingerprint record existed in Iowa's database not because of any criminal activity, but because of a background check conducted when he applied for employment with the United States Postal Service in 1980. The database entry showed a man with no arrest record, no convictions, and no previous contact with law enforcement beyond routine traffic citations that had been resolved with minimal fines. His employment history reflected the kind of steady reliability that Postal Service supervisors valued: 38 years of service with excellent performance evaluations, minimal sick leave usage, and a safety record that had earned him recognition for careful driving and adherence to delivery protocols. When Chen called Detective Rodriguez to report the match, the conversation began with the kind of routine professionalism that characterized most forensic consultations. But as Chen described the confidence level of the fingerprint comparison and provided details about Thomas Fitzgerald's background, Rodriguez felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied major breakthroughs in cold case investigations. Rodriguez pulled Fitzgerald's personal information from multiple databases while Chen remained on the phone, confirming details that made the forensic evidence even more disturbing. Fitzgerald had been living at the same address since 1974, establishing him as a long-term neighborhood resident whose presence would have been familiar to other community members throughout the period when Michael Harris was murdered. His voter registration records showed consistent participation in local elections, and his name appeared in Cedar Rapids Gazette archives as someone who had volunteered for community cleanup projects and contributed to charitable fundraising efforts. The psychological profile required to sustain the kind of deception that Fitzgerald had maintained for 35 years challenged everything Rodriguez understood about criminal behavior. The proximity of Fitzgerald's work area to the crime scene meant that he would have been intimately familiar with the factory's location, the surrounding streets, and the patterns of activity that characterized the neighborhood during different times of day. His mail delivery route had included the residential areas immediately surrounding the industrial district where the factory was located. Rodriguez requested verification of the fingerprint match, a process that involved independent analysis by a second forensic technician who would compare the evidence without knowledge of the initial results. The confirmation process required 2 additional days, during which Rodriguez found herself unable to concentrate on other cases or routine police work. The verified match report arrived on March 13 with the same 99.7% confidence level, accompanied by detailed technical documentation that explained the comparison methodology and mathematical calculations used to establish the probability of accuracy. Chen's supplementary analysis noted that the fingerprint on Michael's coffee mug showed characteristics that indicated it had been made by someone handling the mug shortly before it was broken. Rodriguez spent the weekend reviewing every aspect of the original investigation that mentioned Thomas Fitzgerald, searching for clues that might have indicated his involvement beyond the routine neighbor testimony that had seemed unremarkable in 1988. His witness statement described seeing Michael leave for work on the evening of December 15, but provided no additional details about their interaction or his own activities during the subsequent hours. Detective Sullivan's interview notes characterized Fitzgerald as cooperative and forthcoming, someone who appeared genuinely concerned about the violent crime that had occurred in his neighborhood, and willing to assist the investigation in any way possible. Nothing about his demeanor or responses had raised suspicion. For 35 years, Thomas Fitzgerald had been exactly what he appeared to be: a quiet, reliable postal worker who served his community with distinction and lived the kind of unremarkable life that attracted no attention from law enforcement. The forensic evidence that linked him to Michael Harris's murder would force Cedar Rapids to confront the possibility that evil could hide behind the most ordinary facades. The evidence was undeniable, but confronting a killer who had lived freely for 35 years would require careful planning and perfect execution. Stay with us to witness the dramatic arrest that would finally bring justice to Michael Harris and closure to a community that had waited decades for answers. Detective Rodriguez arrived at Thomas Fitzgerald's house on Maple Street at 60:15 am on March 15, 2023. Accompanied by Detective James Murphy and 2 uniformed officers who positioned themselves strategically around the property's perimeter. The arrest warrant in Rodriguez's jacket pocket represented 35 years of unanswered questions that were about to collide with the mundane reality of a 73-year-old retiree who had been watering his front lawn roses when the police vehicles pulled into his driveway. The house at 1247 Maple Street looked exactly like what it was: the well-maintained home of someone who took pride in property upkeep and appreciated the small details that distinguished a house from a mere shelter. The front porch featured hanging baskets filled with petunias that Fitzgerald had planted according to a rotation schedule that ensured continuous blooms throughout the growing season. A hand-painted mailbox bore the house number in neat black numerals that Fitzgerald had touched up each spring as part of his annual maintenance routine. The driveway was edged with precision that reflected decades of careful attention, and the lawn showed the diagonal mowing pattern that Fitzgerald had preferred since retiring from the Postal Service gave him more time to devote to landscaping projects. Fitzgerald answered the door wearing a faded Iowa Hawkeyes sweatshirt and canvas work pants stained with fertilizer from his morning gardening routine. His initial expression showed the kind of mild curiosity that elderly residents typically displayed when police arrived in their neighborhoods, concern mixed with the assumption that someone else was experiencing trouble that required official intervention. But Rodriguez watched his face transform as she identified herself and requested that he accompany them to the police station for questioning regarding the murder of Michael Harris. The color drained from Fitzgerald's complexion with a speed that seemed almost supernatural, and his hands began trembling in a way that suggested someone whose carefully constructed world was collapsing around him. "I don't understand," Fitzgerald managed to say, his voice cracking slightly on the words. "Michael Harris died years ago. Why would you want to talk to me about that?" Rodriguez had conducted hundreds of arrests during her career, but she had never encountered someone whose psychological defenses crumbled as completely as Fitzgerald's did when confronted with evidence of his involvement in the decades-old murder. Most suspects maintained their denials even when presented with overwhelming proof, clinging to alternative explanations or claiming that evidence had been fabricated or misinterpreted. Fitzgerald offered no denials, no expressions of outrage or confusion that might have indicated genuine innocence. Instead, he simply nodded slowly and asked if he could change into clean clothes before accompanying them to the police station. The request was delivered with the kind of resigned politeness that suggested someone who had been expecting this moment for 35 years. The drive to the Cedar Rapids Police Department took 12 minutes through neighborhoods where Fitzgerald had delivered mail for nearly 4 decades. Rodriguez watched him in the rearview mirror as they passed houses where he had known 3 generations of residents, where he had carried birthday cards and Christmas packages and sympathy cards for families dealing with loss and celebration. The interrogation room at the Cedar Rapids Police Department had been designed to create psychological pressure through environmental control. Fluorescent lighting that cast harsh shadows, a metal table bolted to the floor, and walls painted in a shade of institutional beige that seemed calculated to drain hope from anyone forced to spend extended time within them. Fitzgerald sat with his hands folded in his lap, staring at the table surface while Rodriguez and Murphy explained that forensic evidence had linked him to Michael Harris's murder. His breathing became increasingly shallow as the detectives described the fingerprint match, and sweat began beading on his forehead despite the room's carefully maintained cool temperature. The silence that followed stretched for nearly 20 minutes, broken only by the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sounds of police department activity in adjoining rooms. Rodriguez had learned that patience was often more effective than aggressive questioning when dealing with suspects who were wrestling with the decision to confess, and something about Fitzgerald's demeanor suggested that he was engaged in exactly that kind of internal struggle. When Fitzgerald finally began to speak, his voice was so quiet that the recording equipment barely captured his words. The confession began with an explanation of circumstances that dated back to November 1988, when Fitzgerald had approached Michael Harris with a request for a personal loan of $1,500 to cover medical expenses associated with his mother's cancer treatment. "My mother was dying," Fitzgerald said, his eyes focused on his folded hands rather than meeting the detective's gaze. "The insurance didn't cover all of her treatments, and I didn't know where else to turn." Michael had a reputation in the neighborhood as someone who helped people when they were in trouble. Rodriguez listened without interruption as Fitzgerald described the financial arrangement that had seemed reasonable to both men when they agreed to it in Michael's kitchen on November 20, 1988. The loan was to be repaid in monthly installments over 18 months, an arrangement that would have been manageable under normal circumstances. But Fitzgerald's mother's condition had deteriorated more rapidly than expected, requiring additional treatments and medications that consumed his available income and made the agreed-upon payment schedule impossible to maintain. By December, he was 3 weeks behind on his first installment and facing medical bills that would prevent him from making any payments for the foreseeable future. I called Michael at the factory and asked if we could meet during his dinner break. Fitzgerald continued, his voice becoming even quieter as he approached the moment that had defined the rest of his life. I thought if I could explain the situation, maybe we could work out a different payment schedule. Michael was always reasonable about things like that. The meeting between Fitzgerald and Michael Harris on the night of December 15th had been arranged when Fitzgerald drove to the factory around 200 am, entering through an employee entrance that Michael had unlocked from the inside. They had spoken near Michael's workstation, where they could have privacy without disturbing other workers or attracting attention from security personnel. Rodriguez could see Fitzgerald's hands shaking more violently as he described the conversation that had escalated from a financial discussion into the confrontation that cost Michael Harris his life. According to Fitzgerald's account, Michael had become increasingly agitated as they talked, demanding immediate payment of the overdue installment and threatening to pursue legal action that would have resulted in wage garnishment from Fitzgerald's postal service employment. He grabbed my shirt and pushed me against one of those metal cabinets, Fitzgerald said, finally looking up to meet Rodriguez's eyes. I had never seen Michael angry before. He was always so calm, so reasonable. But that night he was different. Desperate maybe. Scared about something. The physical confrontation had triggered a panic response in Fitzgerald, who understood that losing his job would leave him unable to support his dying mother or maintain the modest lifestyle that had defined his adult years. In the struggle that followed, he had picked up a wrench from Michael's workbench and struck him once across the back of the head. I just wanted him to let go of me, Fitzgerald whispered, tears beginning to stream down his cheeks. I didn't mean to hurt him. I certainly didn't mean to kill him, but when he fell, when he hit his head on that concrete floor, I knew he was dead. I knew my life was over. Fitzgerald's description of the moments following Michael's collapse revealed the desperate thinking of someone whose existence had suddenly veered into nightmare territory. He had checked for signs of life, finding none, and realized that he was standing over the dead body of a man whose murder would inevitably be investigated by law enforcement agencies with resources that far exceeded his ability to cover his tracks. The decision to leave Michael's body at his workstation and flee the factory had been motivated by Fitzgerald's desperate hope that the death might be attributed to an accident or unrelated criminal activity. He had wiped down surfaces that he remembered touching, including the wrench that had killed Michael, and attempted to stage the scene in a way that would conceal evidence of their struggle. But he had forgotten about Michael's coffee mug, which he had moved while positioning the body, leaving the fingerprint that would eventually link him to the crime 35 years later. For more than 3 decades, that oversight had haunted his dreams and made him jump at every unexpected knock on his door. Rodriguez documented every detail of Fitzgerald's confession while processing the emotional weight of a case that had finally found resolution. The story that emerged was not the complex criminal conspiracy that cold case investigators often uncovered, but rather the simple tragedy of 2 neighbors whose financial arrangement had escalated into violence that neither man had anticipated or intended. After 35 years of lies, Thomas Fitzgerald had finally told the truth about the night that changed everything. But his confession was just the beginning of a legal process that would force Cedar Rapids to confront how well they really knew their neighbors. Stay tuned for the dramatic conclusion of this incredible cold case story. The news of Thomas Fitzgerald's arrest on March 15, 2023, spread through Cedar Rapids with the kind of devastating speed that only the most shocking revelations can achieve. By noon, Every major news outlet in Iowa was running stories about the postal worker who had carried a murder secret for 35 years, and by evening, national media had picked up the story as an example of how modern forensic technology was solving cold cases that had seemed permanently closed. But for the residents of Cedar Rapids who had known Fitzgerald personally, the news struck with a force that went far beyond curiosity about criminal justice or forensic advancement. This was a man who had delivered their mail for decades, who had known their routines and their families, who had been welcomed into their community as a trusted public servant and reliable neighbor. Margaret Thompson received the phone call from Detective Rodriguez on the afternoon of Fitzgerald's arrest, learning that her sister's long wait for answers had finally ended with the kind of resolution that brought justice without providing comfort. At 68 years old, Margaret had spent nearly half her life waiting for this moment, but now that it had arrived, she found herself struggling to process emotions that seemed too complex for simple categories like relief or satisfaction. Janet always believed that someone in Cedar Rapids knew more than they were saying. Margaret told the Cedar Rapids Gazette in an interview, published the day after Fitzgerald's arrest. She was right, but none of us imagined it would be someone who seemed so normal, so helpful. He delivered Janet's mail. He asked about her health. He expressed sympathy for her loss. How do you do that when you're the person who caused the loss? The revelation that Fitzgerald had maintained his facade for 35 years while continuing to interact with Janet Harris and other members of Michael's family challenged fundamental assumptions about human nature and the ability to detect deception in people who seemed trustworthy and genuine. Reverend Paul Matthews of Grace Lutheran Church, where Fitzgerald had been a regular parishioner for over 40 years, found himself fielding questions from congregation members who struggled to reconcile their memories of a quiet, dependable man who contributed to charity drives and helped maintain the church grounds with the knowledge that he had committed murder and concealed it throughout his entire adult life. Thomas was always early for services, Reverend Matthews told reporters gathered outside the church on March 16, sat in the same pew every Sunday, participated in our community outreach programs, and never gave anyone reason to question his character or his faith. I've been a pastor for 30 years, and I thought I could recognize the signs when someone was carrying a burden of guilt or sin. Apparently, I was wrong. The psychological impact on Cedar Rapids extended beyond the immediate circle of people who had known Fitzgerald personally. Parents who had allowed their children to approach the friendly mailman for decades suddenly questioned their judgment about recognizing potential threats. Neighbors who had trusted Fitzgerald with spare keys during vacations wondered what other secrets might be hiding behind familiar faces. Detective Rodriguez found herself fielding calls from residents who wanted to report suspicious behavior they claimed to have observed in Fitzgerald over the years. Behavior that had seemed innocuous at the time, but now took on sinister significance in light of his confession. Most of these reports were the product of hindsight bias and the human tendency to reinterpret past events through the lens of current knowledge, but they reflected the genuine anxiety that Fitzgerald's arrest had created throughout the community. The Postal Service announced that Fitzgerald's route would be permanently reassigned, and that additional background checks would be implemented for employees who worked in positions requiring regular contact with the public. The statement was intended to reassure customers, but it also served as a reminder that the institution responsible for mail delivery had unknowingly employed a killer for nearly 4 decades. Cedar Rapids City Council called an emergency meeting to address public concerns about safety and the adequacy of law enforcement resources devoted to investigating violent crimes. Councilwoman Patricia Wells, who had been elected partly on a platform of supporting victims' rights, used the meeting to announce the creation of a memorial fund in Michael Harris's name that would provide resources for cold case investigations throughout Iowa. Michael Harris waited 35 years for justice, Wells said during the televised council meeting. His family waited 35 years for answers. We can't change that, but we can make sure that other families don't have to wait as long for the truth about their loved ones. The Cedar Rapids Gazette published a series of articles examining the original investigation and questioning whether Fitzgerald might have been identified as a suspect if different investigative techniques had been employed in 1988. The retrospective analysis was largely unfair to the detectives who had worked the case within the limitations of their era, but it reflected the community's need to understand how such a deception had been possible. Former Detective Raymond Sullivan, now 82 years old and living in a retirement community in Des Moines, granted his first interview about the Harris case since his retirement in 2003. Sullivan defended the thoroughness of his investigation, while acknowledging that Fitzgerald's cooperative demeanor and clean background had deflected any suspicion that might have developed. Thomas Fitzgerald was exactly what he appeared to be, a helpful neighbor who wanted to assist with the investigation, Sullivan told the Gazette. Had no criminal record. No history of violence, no obvious connection to Michael Harris beyond living in the same neighborhood. We interviewed dozens of people who fit that same description. If we had treated every witness as a potential suspect, we would have destroyed the community's willingness to cooperate with law enforcement. The most poignant reactions came from residents who had developed personal relationships with Fitzgerald over the decades of his mail delivery service. Elderly customers who had relied on him to check on their welfare during harsh winter weather struggled to reconcile their memories of his kindness with the knowledge of what he had done. Helen Kowalski, 87 years old and housebound due to mobility issues, had considered Fitzgerald almost like family during the years when he had been her primary daily contact with the outside world. He would shovel my walkway without being asked, she told reporters, who would bring my mail to the door instead of leaving it in the box when the weather was bad. He remembered my birthday every year. How can someone be so thoughtful and caring while carrying such a terrible secret? The questions that Helen Kowalski raised echoed throughout Cedar Rapids as residents grappled with the realization that they had fundamentally misjudged someone they had trusted for decades. The Fitzgerald arrest had shattered more than just a cold case. It had damaged the social fabric that held small communities together and made neighbors feel safe in their assumptions about each other. As Fitzgerald awaited trial in the Lynn County Jail, Cedar Rapids began the difficult process of rebuilding trust and processing the psychological trauma that his deception had inflicted on an entire community. The man who had seemed to embody the values of service and reliability had become a symbol of how effectively evil could disguise itself behind the most ordinary facades. The arrest had answered the question of who killed Michael Harris, but it raised even more disturbing questions about how well we really know the people we trust. Don't miss our final chapter, where we'll explore the trial that brought closure to this incredible case and examine what it means for communities everywhere.